Good morning. This is Lester Sharlach on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. I have the pleasure of interviewing Debbie Berman at our archives at 990 Hope Street in Stamford, Connecticut. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Lester.
Tell me, Debbie, where were you born?
I was born right here in Stamford, Connecticut, in the Stamford Hospital.
And when were you born?
January 8th, 1934. In the middle of a blizzard, my mother tells me.
And were your parents born in the United States?
Yes, they were both born in New York City, and my mother came to Stamford when she was 6 years old.
And how about your dad?
My dad came when he met my mother, and they were married. They met through a mutual friend at the beach, down at what was Spelke Beach at the time.
Mm-hmm. And what were your parents both employed?
At the time, my father had finished school, and he ended up being employed in my grandfather's business.
And
He had a
what-
little gas station in conjunction with the wholesale meat business, and eventually went into that. My mother just helped with bookkeeping and cooking and things.
And is that the reason that they came to Stamford? Was that they had family living here?
No, my mother was here because my grandfather came from the Bronx, 138th Street. He was married, and that's where she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather originally was a butcher, and my grandmother's sister used to take her to the butcher shop, and she met this nice butcher, Annie Goldberg, and who was Brazel at the time. And they met and they got married and came to Stamford because my grandfather wanted a farm. And my grandmother didn't want to leave New York City because she was afraid of leaving her sisters and everybody. Half of them were still in the old country and some of them were here. So Grandpa said, let's get on the train and we'll get off the last stop and we'll look around. So they took an hour ride, a little more than an hour in those days, and they got out and it was Stamford. And he saw that there were Jewish people, stores, Pacific Street, and decided it was a good place to set up a business, and it was no problem for my grandmother because her family could get on the train and come, or come by boat. I think they came onto Canal Street. Somehow there was something that brought them into Canal Street.
Yeah, it was called the Shady Side. It was there were two ferry boats that went from the end of Canal Street down to Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, so that's what they did. And
So they never had the farm.
They had a farm.
They did. And
They
where was
did.
the farm?
Farm was where the Jewish cemetery is on West Hill Road. There's a road between the original Jewish cemetery, and that whole property in the back was their farm. If you know McGregor Drive and Akbar Road, that was also part of the farm. And I have a friend who lives up there and said when they were building the house, they found old wagon wheels and farm implements. It was all part of Grandpa's farm. I have a few of those things at home, but not a lot.
And what did he raise on the farm?
Well, they did slaughtering for their, eventually they had a wholesale meat business, but they had a little store on Pacific Street called the Cash and Carry Market. And Grandpa, they had cows, and they had other chickens and stuff like that, but mainly it was, Dave will remember more when he's interviewed, because he came into that business at the beginning when they still had the farm and still had the slaughterhouse. It was legal in those days. You didn't have to have it through an inspected company.
Was the property then sold to the synagogue from?
I'm not
the farm?
sure about that, but I know that the property was then sold to a developer, and that's how they made McGregor, Akbar, all that in the back there.
And getting back to your growing up in Stamford, did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one sister, Bobby Klein.
Mm-hmm. And where did you go to school?
I I went to a school that doesn't exist anymore, down where kind of like where the mall is. It was called Center Street School. I went from kindergarten to 6th there. Then we went to Burdick, and then I went to Stanford High.
Where were you
And we
living?
walked everywhere. No bus service in those days.
Where did you live?
I lived on Strawberry Hill, where the Hayes House is now. We lived in a house with my grandparents on one floor, and we were on another floor, and they rented the top floor to an artist, Mayo Sorkman, you might remember.
Yes,
if you
I do.
remember. Yeah.
Then you graduated high school. Did you go further your education?
I did. I went to University of Michigan. I graduated high school, and our big reunion is coming up this fall with a lot of your members. Walter Haas, Joel Friedman, you know,
Yeah.
the whole gang. It's going to be a big reunion. And
When did you meet your husband?
I met my husband, actually, that's my favorite story, through our parents. My mother was asked to fill in a card game at Adele Berman's house. And Dave was in high school, but I didn't know him. And my mother came home and said, Adele has the nicest son. And next time you have a party, you ought to invite him. So I said, Mother, if you like him, you invite him. And that's what started a whole romance. Because he was at college, and he asked me to come for a weekend party. And because they knew the family, they said it was okay that I go. And the rest is history. 56 years.
That's a long time.
This July.
And your members of your family, were they engaged in the farm or in the?
Yes, the grandparents were.
Uh,
And I had when they opened up what was Stanford Dressed Beef, then my uncle had just graduated college. He thought he was going to be an architect or something else, but he ended up going into the business. So he took care of the poultry end of the business, and Grandpa was in the wholesale meat business. Then when Dave was working in New York in Macy's, and they asked would he come in, and he debated and finally said he would give it a try. And he went in, and then my brother-in-law, Bobby's husband, ended up going in.
And what was your uncle's name?
George Goldberg.
Uh,
The whole Goldberg family are related, but we always, I shouldn't say it, but my Uncle George was the thin one. And the other George Goldberg, who was very active in the Historical Society, they lived on Rock Spring Road. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there was always some confusion between the two George Goldbergs.
Well, it was
as they were-
because, yeah, and there was a big difference. I don't know, they weren't that close, but my grandfather was very close to the other George Goldberg's brother. They were very close, but they were all that they had left of the whole family.
So when they were in the wholesale beef business,
Yeah.
was it just a local area business? I mean, it just served the local butcher shops, or did they?
They had they had local butcher shops. Lotstein was there. He had the beginning of his business. I think he had a grocery store then. But there were all these little Max Meyer and Saltzman and Weinstein and that kind of a thing you went to. Or you went to Brazel's if you kept kosher. That was my grandmother's brother. My grandmother was the oldest, and Chaim Brazel was almost one of the youngest.
How many children were in that family?
Do I have to count? I'm not prepared to think about it. It was my grandmother, and she had a couple of sisters, and she had a couple of brothers, and
So it was a large family.
it was enough. Nice.
Were they selling kosher beef, or was?
Well, do you want to hear that story?
Yeah, that's
I
why
don't know
you're
if you want it on time. It seems that they were selling kosher beef, and my grandfather had a run-in with the rabbi, and they found that the truck was coming in from New York, with the meat on the truck, and sometimes, not pork, but non-kosher meat was separated by cardboard or paper or something, because it all came from like United Dressed Beef or something, which did both. So my grandfather decided this is ridiculous. So when he had the grocery store, it was definitely treif, because they sold ham and cheese and all kinds of stuff.
And where was the grocery store?
Right on Pacific Street, between Gruber's little card shop and Brazel's kosher butcher market. There was an alley in between, that alley that you have a picture of behind Holly Place. Not Holly Place, behind
Canal Street.
Brazel's market.
That was Canal Street.
No, it was Pacific Street.
No, but behind Pacific
Was it?
Street.
I thought it wasn't State Street, it was Canal Street? I
Well,
don't know, I'm not sure.
depends on which side
We'll
of the
have to
street you're
look.
on.
Yeah, Dave might remember
Yeah.
that also.
And then, do you have any children?
We have 3 boys, Brad, Andy, and Matt.
Mm-hmm.
2 are lawyers, one's an art director. All college graduates, all doing well, some in graduate school. I could brag for an hour.
Grandchildren?
Grandchildren, we have 6 grandchildren. Andy is in California with 4 children. Brad is right here in Wilton with 2. Brad's oldest, Sam, is graduating next weekend from Hampshire College, and Caleb just started Franklin and Marshall. Andy's oldest daughter, Hannah, is graduating and going to Berkeley in the fall.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about Pacific Street. What do you remember growing up on Pacific
A
Street?
lot, because I went to Center Street School. And in those days, it seemed very safe. We would walk from Center Street School during lunchtime to Pacific Street alone. I was like, what, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, and they let us walk from one place to another.
And where was Center Street School located?
It was probably across from, if you're coming down near the mall, it was near where the telephone company lot is. In that corner between Suburban Avenue, that whole corner,
Yeah.
to
Grey Rock
there's
Place.
that funny building with the
Well, it'd be Grey Rock
Grey
Place.
Rock, it's
yeah.
Grey Rock Place, because I was a safety there.
Yeah.
And that was the corner we stood at.
Because the first Jewish center, which was called the Hebrew Institute,
It was over there.
was over there, yeah.
They had the girls' club, was still there. And we walked down, and then we bought our shoes at Rimlin's, and we got groceries, Grandma's store, so that was fine. Carp's Bakery, penny candy at Gruber's or Carp's around the corner. Movies.
Yeah.
My uncle had the kosher butcher shop. I couldn't stand to go by there because they kill the chickens.
Where was the kosher butcher shop?
Right next door to Grandma's store.
Uh-huh.
And then the Anger used to work, Mr. Anger, who had his own store later, worked for my grandparents as the produce guy first.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sandhouse Hardware. And, I don't know, it goes up. It's almost like I remember every store, Weinstein's and Carp's and, I don't know, all there was, Epstein's. Weren't the Epstein's? One
The
of
Epstein's, the tire shop, Epstein's? That was on Brook
That
Street.
was on Brook Street. You might remember even more, because, memories.
And when you were married, did you settle in Stanford?
Oh, yeah. Well, first year, Dave was in the service, because he had ROTC at Yale, so then he had to go overseas. He got positioned overseas. So we found out that, I had 6 months of school to go. So I promised my parents I'd finish, get my degree. And then we made arrangements for him to come home and get married, and it was Rabbi Ehrenkrantz. And he called me up in Michigan and said, Debbie, you can't get married. I said, what are you talking about? He said, it's Tissue B'Av. It was July. Ruth and Saul Corton had the same problem. So we ended up, they had the temple in Stanford, and we went to White Plains to be married. But it was Rabbi Ehrenkrantz with Rabbi Perlman, because my in-laws were active at Bethel.
And what year was that?
1955, July 31st.
Mhm.
We're still together.
Well, then you went into business for yourself.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I opened a little consignment shop with Florence Alexander Surik. She was Berman for a while.
Mhm.
And after a few months, she wasn't interested. And it was where Joel Friedman has his, the big parking lot, with all the stores in Springdale. There was a little blue building that was vacant, and it was where the Dairy Queen is, or whatever they call it now. And I started there, and with a lot of consignments, and then moved across the street, and I called it Pony House Antiques at the time. And then what happened was we were able to get the first floor of an old house across the street next to Bill and Fred's in Springdale.
Mhm.
And I couldn't afford the rent. Oh, it was like $100 and something a month. So we had a few girls paying $10 a month to keep the store going, and we all had little rooms. Each one had a different room. And that's how it started. So people would come in and ask me, I'm moving, could you help me out? And one thing led to another, and one of the girls in the shop and I started a business as Good Riddance Girls, and she's still in existence, but I went out. I thought I retired at one point in my life, and everybody kept calling me because I had a lot of realtors I worked for who liked what I did, I guess. And so I went back and never went out of business. And it's been a long while that I just do Debbie Berman sales. And I'm really busy.
Yeah, and
People
you're
moving.
you're in this by yourself?
I'm in this by myself with my husband
Oh,
who
no,
helps
I'm not,
me.
no, I'm not into that. I'm just a paid employee.
Yeah, paid employee, he says.
And it's still, you have a very good reputation around
I
town.
hope so.
Yeah. So your business is done all by referrals?
No, I have an ad in the Yellow Pages. I have an ad in the phone book. I mean, the regular. I do have, cards and information that goes out. I've had a few articles written about me in various magazines.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it is referrals and word of mouth because a lot of realtors do recommend me, and that's where I get a lot. And the one this week I got because I play tennis with the girl across the street.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens, one
Yeah.
leads to another.
Do you remember anything going back about living in the Depression era?
It didn't affect us because I was right afterwards. My mother tells me stories about it. I do know one story that affected the family because my grandfather had lost money during the Depression, but they started the business back in the house doing something, and they took the table from the dining room and everything, and they got this building and went back and they opened this cash and carry market.
Mm-hmm.
And I just heard stories about it, but I was very lucky, my sister and I, because it was 34 and 30, what is she, 36 or 7. And it was just really post. And we had a car, and we had this 3-family house. They had moved up to Strawberry Hill. And I guess it just worked out for them.
As I recall, the Strawberry Hill was really the place for the people who were making it. First they moved from Pacific Street to Lafayette Street, and then if you got to Strawberry Hill,
That was
you really were the top of the world.
No, there was 2 steps beyond that.
Oh, well, David will tell you some cute stories. Our favorite story about that is Billy Heller. I don't know if you've interviewed Bill. And he said that everybody started on Pacific Street. There was Chowski's and Cash and Goldberg's and whatever. And as they became more affluent, they moved up. And as you say, to Strawberry Hill, there was nothing past Belltown. I mean, Case Acres was the new development. We went to look at houses there, it was different. And Billy says, and then they moved to the townhouse, they moved to Strawberry Hill, and then now that we're older, and they moved out into the country, and then they started moving back to the townhouse and Bedford Street and Forest Street and now the Trump Towers. And he said, one of these days, Mr. Chowsey's gonna hang his head out the door and say, where have you been all these years? Because that's what's happened.
And you've been, you say, in radio, and is this in regard to your consignment business?
Oh, the business. Yeah, we did a little thing on the radio in New York City once, and trying to think. I've given some talks on decorating with antiques to Brandeis years ago, and I don't know, we had a couple of articles just like in that Stanford magazine where they write up about different things, different businesses and whatever, and I've been featured in that.
Are there any anecdotes about your family and the meat business that you think you might want to
Well, I
tell
think
us about?
David's going to be able to tell you more about that than I did, because he worked with them on a day-to-day basis. We quote my father all the time because he had the little gas station, Samar service station, which was right next to the wholesale meat business. And gasoline was 5 gallons for $1. And I remember that because Daddy was saying, can you imagine 5 gallons for $1? It's so much money.
Yeah.
Now that we're over 4.
Where was the gas station?
Right next to the Stanford Dressed Beef Company. It was
It's
like, it
Canal
was on
Street.
Canal Street,
And the corner of North State Street.
North State
Mhm.
Street,
Before the
Canal.
freeway.
Well, you've spent your lifetime in Stanford. You've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Do you think it was better when you were growing up and Stanford was a much smaller community?
Well, it was different, and I will tell you the one thing, it was much safer. As I said, we walked from Center School home to Strawberry Hill.
Mhm.
We walked to Pacific Street for lunch. I was by myself. And I said, how old could I have been? 8, 9 years old, 7, 8, 9. My mother let me walk. Sometimes she picked us up because we couldn't eat lunch there. We had to have lunch. If she wasn't working at the store for my grandparents, then I'd be home, and I didn't have that much time. And the only kids who could stay and eat lunch in the playground were the children whose parents worked full-time and couldn't afford to go home. And the rest of us all had to go home, but a lot of them lived right around the area.
Yeah.
We just happened to, they closed the school later, right? My sister ended up in Belltown.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember having to eat there a few times if somebody was sick or somebody was out of town.
Yeah.
And you had to get permission. Then also, the one cute thing about that was we had the 2 doors, girls' side and boys' side. I remember that, but I remember I thought it was safe. I never worried about that. Excuse me, maybe my parents did worry for me, I don't know, but we did. It was, the Jewish community was very strong because we all had each other. There was some bigotry then because areas were restricted, so we hung around the Jewish Center, which was about, 5 houses away from me. They didn't have Hoyt Street. We used to walk through the woods, like along the side
Yeah.
into the center. And everyone came after school because we had the house across from the school. They parked their car, they came in for a drink, my mother was there every afternoon with cookies and milk for whomever wanted to go.
When you spent time at the center, were you active in any
Oh, yeah.
groups?
We had the Centene Club. That was Dottie Silberman. That was like a teenage club. I went to Camp JC there. I found my pictures till I was a counselor later on at the camp. I was active in Girl Scouts. Mrs. Alexander was our Girl Scout leader. We held the meetings there. In those days, girls didn't become bat mitzvah. So I never went to Hebrew school or anything. Some of them did just for the education, but we didn't use the center for that. And we belonged to Gada Shalom, where the girls were second-class citizens in those days.
Yeah. And when you were in high school, were you were there Jewish clubs or things still, or was it all at the?
And we just did it in the summer, working at the camp. I don't remember a Jewish club when I was in high school, although we took dancing lessons there. I mean, social and, you know, like ballet and tap and everything. The rooms, seems like we were always at the Jewish Center. We swam there, we just used the center a
Yeah.
lot. It was a place to meet, social.
Yeah,
I remember meeting you there, Lester, with Elaine.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure
I hope-
speaking with you this morning.
Thank you. I hope I filled you in with some things.
Well, I'm sure that you'll enjoy watching the DVD when we deliver it to you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, it's okay.
We started very late. So
Lester didn't
yeah,
show up on
no,
time?
No,
Yeah.
I
that's
thought it was
why-
10 o'clock.
That's, I
No,
called you,
he thought it was
maybe you
10.
ought to call your wife, because
Oh,
I
I
called
never
home.
told you about my.
You wanna add on?
mother's year.
We can do that.
No, I just.
Okay, we can add on.
No, I mean.
No,
that
no,
you
do
were
it, 'cause I think
talking
it's
about my-
interesting.
you
I think
thought
it's
you were
interesting.
talking about my mother coming to Stanford, that she was in the Stanford High School class in 1928.
Okay, wait,
And she
stop,
was on
stop,
the
stop,
honor
stop,
roll.
stop. We're gonna do it, okay? All right, say you forgot to, you wanna add
Okay.
something, just say that first.
Add something. You asked me about my parents in Stanford, and my mother was educated in Stanford, and I found at one of my tag sales, my mother graduated in the class of 1928A, and her name was Marcie Ellen Goldberg. They called her May when she was in various plays, and that's another story. She expected to enter normal school. They came and offered her a scholarship to Barnard, because she's, the other part of this is she was 97 percentile in 2 or 3 of her classes here. And my grandfather said, women work in the store, they don't go to college. My uncle went to Yale, he was okay, and it was in New Haven, it wasn't far away, and my mother was not allowed. And for her whole life, we heard that story, and we had to be educated.
Is your mother's picture
My
in there?
mother's pictures here in the class
Why don't you,
along with everyone.
hold the
You'll
book
get
up
a
so you
big
can see the
cut. Here
picture.
it is. This is my mother. Doesn't look like we remembered her because we didn't know her when she was that young. 1928, so she must have been, what, 18? She was born in October. And then they have a whole list, and some of them, when you get to other people you want to talk about, they have the funniest comments about Stanford's finest, who were in her class with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lowell Gordon, the Dictors, a lot of Cora Freed, all the old natives that lived here for their whole life. It's fun. I might have to leave it for you. I hate to part with this. My sister said only you keep all the old stuff, but I love it. Lester, you'll get such a kick out of this. Is it over?
You got it?
Okay, thank you.
I have to tell Lester, you remember Lowell Gordon?
Oh, sure, he had a camp too.
Yeah, well, listen to this. Lowell Irving Gordon, he was like the cock who thought the sun had risen to hear him crow. And he was voted most conceited, most, all kinds of stuff.
He was a teacher when we were in high
was,
school,
He
yeah.
was, but I thought that was the funniest one. There's a lot of other people in here. You know who's here too, David? Phyllis's aunt, Sackman, who just passed away
Oh, yeah?
from the Connecticut Clay
Well, we
Class.
knew them well
Yeah,
because,
your mother was so friendly
Friendly
with
with
Sylvia.
Sylvia, yeah.
That was her, that's how
so
I.
which sister just passed away?
Well, isn't it, she a couple of years ago. It's, you know, the Ethel from the Connecticut Play Class.
Ethel? Oh.
Ethel who's,
You know, Ethel was on What's My Line because this was a woman
Should I stop?
Yeah.
I'm
Who was-
recording.
no,
Who was a
well, this
glacier.
is somebody, you could call Phyllis Freeman, she'll love to talk about her and Ethel.
Okay,
What?
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Lester.
This is, again, we're continuing the Berman interviews, and it's May 10th, 2011, and we're at the archives. And good morning, Dave, again, and thank you for coming for the Jewish Historical Society Oral History Project.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Dave, tell me, are you a Stanford native?
Yes, yes.
Where were you born?
Stanford Hospital.
And who was the doctor that delivered you? If you remember.
Dr. Nemoitin, I think.
Dr. Jacob
I
Nemoitin.
think so, yeah, but I'm not really sure.
No.
I'm not positive. I was not alert that day.
And it's pretty hard to go back to the records because it was on rare occasions that Dr. Nemoitin would go to the town clerk's office to register the babies that he delivered.
He was too busy.
And they put on the books that they would pay the doctors 50 cents for every child that they that were registered. And that was strictly because he was neglecting to register, and when he did, he forgot whether they were male or female. And I understand when I went to the town clerk's office a few years ago, that that is still on the books.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you were born in Stanford, and where did you live when you were a child?
Colonial Road, Pine Hill Avenue, Nash Court. We were Pine Hill Avenue, Nash Court.
Mhm. And where did you spend your school days? Yes, you.
I mean, where do we live?
Yeah.
Pine Hill Avenue and Nash Court.
So what schools did you attend then?
Glenbrook School, Stark School, and Stanford High School. I was not here for junior high school.
You were not here?
No, we lived in New Haven then for a few years.
Oh. And you came back to Stanford?
Yeah. We lived 2 years in New Haven. My father had lost his job here and was in between jobs and decided that we would move back to New Haven where the rest of the family was while he looked for a job. We moved back here.
What did your father do? What was his employment?
He was a chemist at Bear Brothers on Canal Street and at, you know, the place that used to be a munitions factory in World War I, way down at the foot of Canal Street. It's still there, the building, it's still there. I can't think of who it was now. I'll think of it along the way.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that there was a munitions factory down there.
You know, he was particularly, his specialty was paints. Car, you know, the metallic gunmetal finish on cars, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. That's what he did. The paint that you saw on the wall that was speckled,
Yeah.
that was his creation. Oh, Atlas Powder Company.
Oh, yes, I
Atlas
remember
Powder.
Atlas.
Atlas Powder
Yeah, I
Company.
didn't know they were in the munitions business.
Yeah.
And I do remember Bear Brothers. I remember being in that factory when they would actually take the bronze or whatever they would call it.
That was up on Fairfield
Fairfield
Avenue.
Avenue.
This one was on Canal Street. They had two places. There's a bronze and aluminum plant on Fairfield Avenue,
Mhm.
and then they had a paint plant on Canal Street. The plant is still there.
Yeah.
It's O&G now.
Mm-hmm. And then there was another paint, Scheller's paint factory.
Scheller worked for the Bear Brothers.
Uh-huh.
He was his father, Joe's father, and what was Joe's brother's name? Because they're still in business. They have a huge business.
Yeah, I know. Well, Ernie.
Ernie.
Ernie
Yeah.
was my age. He
Yeah.
graduated
Yeah,
together.
Ernie. They worked for the Bear Brothers and then had their own business,
Yeah.
which eventually moved from Stanford to Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Because they used to have an enormous amount of power then,
Mhm.
and power was for nothing in Pennsylvania. but they're still in existence and they have a huge business. And Joe is retired. I'm sure that Joe is retired, probably here in East.
Yeah.
Do you ever see her? I never,
Yes.
you do see him?
Yeah, he came to the reunion.
Oh, Joe,
And,
I can't remember
his
Joe
wife-
ever coming.
Yeah, well, his wife comes to visit her sister in New Canaan.
Oh, okay.
So you graduated Stanford High
Yes,
in what year?
1950.
When you were going to Stanford High School, were you active in any organizations, either at the high school or in the?
You know, not really, because I was only there for 2 years, 2 years. And, you know, a few clubs. That was about it. I don't even remember what they were at this point.
Did you belong to any clubs at the Jewish Center?
No.
Mm.
I can't remember. Isn't that amazing how your memory fails you? Because we went to the center. I can't remember. I guess it didn't make much of an impact.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 2 brothers and a sister, younger. One brother is in Rybrook, one is in Boston, and my sister lives in Washington.
And after you graduated high school, what was your next
When I went to college,
and where did you go?
I went to Yale.
And you graduated from Yale?
Yeah, 1954.
And what did you get your degree in, what area?
Industrial psychology.
And what is industrial psychology? How does it relate to the
How to
real
run
world?
how to run a factory
Yeah.
and how to do business in a logical and organized way, how to make enough money so that you could donate to the Yale Alumni Fund.
Mhm.
It was an interesting experience because that's the only college I applied to.
And you were involved then in the ROTC,
Yes.
and you had to serve.
Yeah, we were in, let's see, in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and in Hanau, Germany.
And what rank were you when you were serving in Germany?
A first lieutenant and a second lieutenant and a first lieutenant.
And how many years were you in Germany?
2.5.
And what was your full length of service?
3 years. No, 3 years. Yeah, 3
Okay.
years. Right.
Were you married before you went to Germany?
No, we got married when I was there, and Debbie actually came to live there for 1 year
Mhm.
in 1955.
So, as I understand it, you were stationed in Germany, but you came back and were married while you were still
Here.
in service?
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
we were married here at what's the name of the place in White Plains? Temple Israel, I guess it is, or something. Yeah.
When you're in high school, you have a significant person who you remember as being a mentor?
Mr. Heck. I love the guy. I love him. He was a great guy.
Dave Hecht.
Dave Heck.
Mhm.
Yes. He was a good guy. Always warm. I'm sure Debbie told you the story. You've heard it about why he was a teacher.
No, let's hear it.
He was probably the world's greatest New York Giants baseball fan.
Yes.
And jokingly, someone would say, well, how did you ever become a teacher? Because you were a friend of Quentin Reynolds, you tutored Quentin Reynolds, you certainly, he said, no. Teaching got out of school at 2 o'clock, and you had time to drive to the polo grounds to see a ball game. And he said, that was my motivation, jokingly, that was my motivation for being a teacher. But he was a good guy.
I can remember when I was in high school, and he was our club leader at the Jewish Center. We had a social club that we didn't know what to name And in the library, there was a deer, a buck, on the wall, and it had antlers. So we looked up, we said, we'll call it the Antlers Club. And it existed while we were in high school for 3 years. And he would take us down to the polo grounds occasionally to a ball game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he could talk for hours.
Yeah, and his wife, Ida,
Ida.
well, Ida Brown was her maiden name. She was my second grade teacher.
Oh, is that right? Wow. No, I only knew, I mean, I knew Mrs. Heck, but I didn't have her as a teacher.
So after you were now married and you're out of the service, what was the next place?
Then you went to look for a job. And I went to work for Macy's on 34th Street. And it's interesting, I was standing in a line, and I met a guy named Abe Bressler. And you meet somebody, you look at them, and you like them. And that was in 1956 or 7, and we've been friends, standing in a line, waiting for an interview for a job. We became friends and stayed friends.
What was your
Still
position?
friends.
What was your position at Macy's?
Well, Macy's, was until it was run on 2 platforms. Most stores were of that type were run on 2 platforms. They had a merchandising platform, people who developed the merchandising, and then they had an operational platform, and the 2 didn't mix. For instance, when you took inventory, a merchandising person could not take inventory. It had to be a person from operations, and I worked in operations, and I was the supervisor in the beginning of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th store. When years ago, Macy's used to deliver. They had the trucks with the red stars on them. They used to deliver whenever they had promised with delivery, and they did all their own packing and packaging, and I was the supervisor on 3 floors of the packing department and delivery department.
And how long was your career at Macy's?
Macy's, only a very, very short career. It was about a year. About a year.
And were you living in Manhattan, or were you?
No, we lived here. We lived with my mother-in-law and father-in-law when we first came back, and then Debbie's uncle owned a house right opposite next to Debbie's grandmother's house, right opposite the high school, and we lived on the 1st floor of that house until we bought our house.
So what was your next job?
Debbie's family was in the meat business, and in the food business, and they had a difficult family situation develop with one of the members of the family, and they said, "Why do you want to work at Macy's? How much are you making?" So I think the pay was $80 a week, but I'm not really sure. But I'm sure it was not. If anything, it was less than that. You can make $10 a week more, but the more important thing is we have to have somebody here whose honesty we can trust. So they convinced me that would be a good thing. And it turned out along with it was a good thing. It was a good thing. It was difficult at times. Family is not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy. But it was good. It was good. It was a good step, and it led to some real successes.
What was actually? I mean, I know it was a wholesale. Was it wholesale and retail business?
Yes, but the retail aspect of it was small. It was basically a wholesale business. At the time, there were no ShopRites or, Stop and Shops. There were mom and pop stores. Stanford was loaded with them, and every other town was too. In our business, there was 3 people, 4 people, 5 people in business in Stanford. There was ourselves, Hartford Division, or it was Sosnowitz and Lotstein then, Armour and Company, Swift and Company, and Wilson and Company. And they were all, the town could support.
Yeah. So you were just serving local butcher shops?
We went, our territory was from the Bronx to the other side of Bridgeport, north to Danbury, and then over to like Westchester County, Carmel, and, Brewster. That's the area that we served.
So were you, did you have your own farm and you're raising your own cattle, or?
No, we had an abattoir, slaughterhouse, right, which is still, the building is still there, on West Hill, behind the cemetery.
It's not part of the cemetery, it's.
No, it's, if you look at the two parts of the cemetery,
Yeah.
there's a driveway that goes down. If you go all the way to the back of that driveway, is a stone building. And
Oh, really?
That was
I
it,
never
yeah.
know. There's a
Yeah.
private house up there, I never realized.
I guess yeah, it's a home now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a home now. So we, Debbie's grandfather and I, we were close. Debbie's grandfather and I were very, very close. We had a great respect for each other as people and as professionals.
Mhm.
And so he and I had a ritual. Monday we went to work, and then I don't know, the second or third week he said, "Well, we have to go someplace Monday night." Okay, so we went someplace Monday night, and where did we go? We went up to in New York State to some cattle auctions, and he would bid, and he would say, you got to learn how to do this." I said, "Okay." And we would bid and buy cattle, and then we would send our truck up to get the cattle the next day.
Mhm.
This became the ritual, but it became the ritual a couple of nights a week, though. And we learned how to be cattle buyers. And we would bring them to our slaughterhouse, and that's where we processed them, and then brought them down to Canal Street.
And how many years were you in that business?
That particular business ended for us, for my brother-in-law and I, in 1970, before 1980.
Mhm.
And at that time, Morty and I went in business for ourselves.
Well, you mentioned your brother-in-law, Morty,
Yeah,
Morty Klein.
right.
Was Morty also working with you in the?
Later on, yeah, he's
Uh-huh.
younger, so a few years later.
And doing the same thing?
No. You mean doing the same thing in what respect?
You know, going to the cattle auctions and?
No, Morty, and then that began to peter out in 1967. No, he didn't, because in 1967, the government put in mandatory meat inspection. And in order to qualify for that, you had to have a building of certain standards. And for us to bring that slaughterhouse up to that standard would have probably meant an investment of a couple $100,000, and it just wasn't worth it.
Mhm.
So we just closed it, and we stayed in the manufacturing and distribution business.
When you say, so now it was Morty and Dave as partners in it?
No, we had no partner, we had no ownership.
Uh,
The family owned the business, and the family was Debbie's mother, father, uncle, and grandfather.
mhm.
We didn't own a business until 76 or 1980, when we went into business for ourselves.
And what did you call your business?
Berman and Klein.
And what was what were you vending? What was the?
Then we switched the business. We switched the business from serving stores and markets and stuff like that to only serving restaurants and institutions.
Mhm.
That's the business that we particularly liked, thought we were good at it, and we were. And so we stayed in that, we developed that business. It was a very small aspect of Stanford dressed beef, but it was our entire aspect.
And were you selling fresh produce and just frozen foods? Or what
We were selling basically fresh product, some frozen product, and later on, when we bought Hartford Provisions building on Dock Street, we then took we took in a person who was in the produce business, so that we were able to sell produce to our accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And that was much later. That was much later.
And how long were you in business with Berman and Klein?
1990, 1992, 95, something like that. When we sold the business we had made a promise to our tenant that if and when we decided to sell the business, he would have the right of first refusal. And we decided then we would sell it, and we gave him the right of first refusal, and he bought the business from us.
So is it still?
No,
Right.
if you've been downtown lately, it's a parking lot.
Oh, okay. And
An expensive parking lot.
what have you been doing to keep busy?
Well, when we closed our business, I had always had a friend in the food business in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, and we used to share strikes together. He would have a strike, and we would deliver his product for him. We would have a strike in Stanford. Dress Beef was organized by the Teamsters Union. We were not. We didn't have a union in our company, and he would deliver for us. So he, after we closed the business, Morty went to work we both went to work for a company for a short period of time that was about the 100th largest food distributor in the country, a company called Schaefer Foods, which was in the Bronx, New Rochelle, and Waterbury. And we both went to work for them, but it wasn't a good marriage. It wasn't a good marriage. Morty then went to work for the city, and I got a call one day from this friend of mine that said, look, I rented one of the stores that I own to Norman, a fellow named Norman Mansour, and I can see now Norman's not going to make it. I used to get the rent check every single month, then I had to go pick it up. Now I got to go every week and pick up a week's check. And one day I'm going to go there, and the place is going to be closed. So he said, and if I tell my wife that I'm going to take back the store, she will then deposit my clothes on the front door. But if I tell her that you'll come and be my partner, that'll be acceptable to her. So I said, okay. I wasn't happy where I was working this place because he was a real gonif, this guy. And that was it. 4 months later he called up. He said, well, you know what, I'm standing in front of the store. It's all locked up. The gates are down. What are you doing? I said, oh, I'll go call, I'll go down to New Rochelle and I'll tell them that I'm leaving. And I'll tell them, however much time they need, a couple of weeks, something like that. When I went there, the guy said, listen, you've been thinking about this for years. Go ahead, go. So then I went to work and in business with this fellow, and we had stores in Ozone Park in Queens, in East New York, in Brooklyn and East New York, and in Williamsburg. And we were in the retail food business. And essentially in the real estate business. It was fine. It was the commute. People say, "Oh my God, you drove to Brooklyn every day." But it's an easy ride. It settles in your mind.
Yeah.
You stay on the right side on the right side. You just drive. And if it's traffic, it takes another 5 minutes or 10 minutes. If there's no traffic, it took 55 minutes. So we had stores that none of you would shop in. You wouldn't shop in there. They were very ethnic supermarkets. And that lasted until 2002. We were sitting one day and he said, you know, I just got a call from Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang was a Korean grocer who would walk in to the store in Ozone Park every Monday morning and say, is the store for sale?
Mhm.
And every Monday morning I would tell him, no, it's not for sale. A little later on, my partner's wife got sick. So he said, you know, he said, my wife has cancer. We have no children, we have no family. I'm gonna stay right with her and we're gonna lick this thing. But in order to do it, I'm not gonna come to work. I'm not gonna come to work. I'm just gonna be with her. So he said, can this, I'd been there 6 months now. I'd never been in the supermarket business in my life. He said, can you take care of it? I said, well, I'll tell you what, I can take care of 2 stores, East New York and Williamsburg. But Ozone Park is a nuisance. He said, okay. Mr. Chang walks in Monday morning, tell him yes. So he walked in, we made a price, he needed to have a down payment of $40,000. He had to bring me a check for $40,000. Mr. Chang, as I said, was Korean. He walked in the next day with a shopping bag.
Cash.
And in the shopping bag was $40,000 worth of food stamps. So I said, Mr. Chang, if I bring these to the bank, tomorrow morning, the Department of Agriculture will be standing at the front door wondering where I got $40,000 worth of food stamps. So we structured a deal and made it and did it, and it was good. And about 6 months later, in walks a Korean couple to one of the other stores and said, you know, we heard that you sold Mr. Chang a store, and we would like to own a store. We have a fruit market on Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn, and we want to own a store. And I said, okay, well, you know, how much will it be? I said, I don't really know. I really have to talk to Mike. So we sit down and we put this crazy price on it. Just, it didn't make any sense. The guy said, okay, that store's mine. I need a 15-year lease, and this, that, and the other thing. I need a note, you know, for the stock, and that was it. Since I'm still friendly with Mr. and Mrs. Yu, and they did better than we ever did. They ran a business like we never ran a business because we weren't interested. All we were interested in was getting enough money to buy another piece of property somewhere. So we were paying attention, obviously, but we're not paying a lot of attention to it. And so we sold them the store, and then we were just in the retail business. We rented the other store in Williamsburg to a nice couple, and that was it. And their career ended. He died. Mike died, and Mike's wife took over. You know, became involved in the business, and we were friends. We were best. I was best man at their wedding, but it wasn't going to work, and it was time to retire anyway. It was time to get out, so we got out. I got out.
So, now you've been retired?
No, I'm not retired.
No.
I just don't get an income. I'm
All
not
right.
retired.
That's it.
You know what it is.
Yeah. In the community activities, what have you been doing?
The men's club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the board of the Smith House. I volunteer at SCORE, you know, counseling for young people, or anybody actually that wants to either go in business or
Wasn't
grow.
On the
Pardon?
board of what?
I'm sorry?
He's on the board.
The Smith House, which is one of the two municipally owned skilled nursing facilities in the state. It's up on Rock Rimmon Road. And
SCORE, what's the acronym SCORE?
it used to be the Senior Corps Retired Executives Now it's a much more aggressive organization, young, it used to be only, old folks our age, and now it's lots of young people. And for some people, it's an avenue to find a business or find a job or something like that. It's fun. It's fun. You're basically counseling or mentoring with young people and helping them either get into a business or grow a business. So that's been fun. The Smith House is it's a project. It's a project. There's a reason there's only 2 municipally owned skilled nursing facilities. And I do one other thing. I have a friend of ours. Remember Jerry Gruber?
Oh,
Jerry?
sure, yeah.
Well, Jerry's, they got divorced, but his wife married, her sister had a son who was a baker. And what I do is I help him market his products. He's a good kid, not a great businessman. But I help him, we got the products in Wegmans, Whole Foods, yeah. It's in a lot of different stores. And then of course my wife keeps. I'm leaving from here, I'm going to work at her sale. Help her.
Have you had time to do any traveling?
Yeah, but you know what we do? We just go back and forth to California. Andy's out there with 4 kids, so we don't get to see him a lot. They don't come here because they're all on different schedules. So it's hard for them to get together. So we go out there. Yeah, we've been to a number of different places, but I don't travel too well these days. I don't really travel that well these days. And I just assume go to California, and then we do the kind of traveling, although we haven't been able to in the last couple of years because of me. Pick a spot and go there, spend a week or 2 and be done with it. The last one we did was in Buenos Aires, and Norman Silverstein?
Yeah.
We spent a couple of days with him. He
Where is
lives there.
He lives there?
Well,
Oh,
you know, it's funny. He's gay,
Yeah.
and he has a partner. And we said to him, "Why do you live in Buenos Aires?" He says, "It's a very accepting society, and it's absolutely cheap as hell." So he said, "Here, I'll give you an illustration." We went to his apartment to have some drinks, we went out to dinner, and we take the elevator, and you get off. It's his apartment, and it's about 2,500 square feet or 2,800 square feet. I said, Norm, what did you pay for this? He said, "We paid $200,000 for it." He said, "The electric bill is about $25 a month. The taxes are $30 a month." He said, "Why wouldn't you live here?" He has a partner. And he said, it's just a good place to live. And so we'll pick a place like that and just study it and then go there for a week or 2. No more, well, we were never cruise people anyway. We found that out on that last trip. So traveling's become a little bit of a problem for me anyway.
Can I ask about
Sure.
2 things? Were you bar mitzvahed, and did you?
Was I bar mitzvah?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And where?
Temple Bethel.
Okay. And do you remember experience anti-Semitism growing up?
Minor, yeah, in Glenbrook. Yeah, there was a couple of families who, the D'Amicos, and yeah, they were anti-Semitic. I mean,
Did you ever get beaten as a kid because you were Jewish or anything
once,
like that?
not because I was Jewish, no,
Okay.
because I failed to do the right thing in a baseball game. No, not because I was Jewish.
Okay. Are you still a member of Temple Bethel?
No. No.
Okay. Did you
What?
have you didn't? I assume you didn't have. Do you have an observant house or not a kosher house
No.
growing up? Okay.
We do not have an observant house or a kosher house. Well, my brother does. My brother Kenny keeps kosher. He said when my youngest daughter turns 50, I'm not going to keep kosher anymore. So he's got about 10 more years, 10, 12 more years. But no, he keeps kosher. And he's not, he's observant to the point of the house. And going out to eat, he won't go to certain kinds of restaurants, but he'll go to eat fish or something like that. So it's, but my sister was until her husband died. And then she stopped being kosher. But she still runs a kosher style house.
Well, having lived a good part of your life in Stanford, do you think that Stanford is on the right track as it is today? Or was it better 30 or 40 or 50 years ago?
Well, what do you mean, what part of Stanford, not the physical part, but what part of life are you asking me to comment on?
Well, the community, I mean, do you think it was a closer knit community when it was smaller?
Yes.
Do you feel that, for example, if we didn't become the transition from a blue-collar town to now we're a financial center, has this been good for the community, or do you think we would have been better off if we had a lot of smaller, not necessarily industrial anymore, but smaller businesses? Because if you see today the huge building downtown where General Ree was is empty.
Lester, when you look downtown and you see the skyline,
Nothing.
1 out of 4 buildings is empty.
Yeah.
So, in that respect, it's not a better town. You're asking if this would be better still as a small business community. I don't think it could ever be a small business. This is not Darien or Greenwich or Lake Forest. It couldn't be a small business community because they wouldn't let you. They wouldn't let you. So Home Depot would be knocking on your doors. They still are. I mean, could you have how many little stores could you have to buy food? What do you got today? You got Stop and Shop. You got the Singaris. And that's about it. Whole Foods.
Yeah.
I don't think it could be a small business community today.
Well, I think even, from a businessman's point, I was in Whole Foods in Darien the other day. The place was empty. I mean, the pie is just so big.
Oh, yeah.
And every big market that opens, it just takes some away from the other market.
Well, I go to, I'm very friendly with the Singaris. And I go to the ShopRite in Commerce Park. It's mostly always busy. Mostly always busy. Fairway is sometimes busy, and price structure is, with a rare exception, is very, very high. But Whole Foods is not a good comparison. It's a different kind of store. And it's like Trader Joe's. I mean, they have a very strong clientele that are willing to pay whatever percentage is higher, and willing to pay for all natural or organic or you're right. This pie here is consistently small. It's 117 or 110 or 17,000 people. That's it. 120. That's it. So they got to divide 120 plus whatever comes in from the outer suburbs or things like that. I don't know. I can give you the comment to the Singaris that what they've done with ShopRite, they should have done 20 years prior to that. That as a business, it's much better than they could have ever developed themselves.
I graduated high school with Rocky Singari.
Yeah.
And I remember when we used to walk every place. We'd walk on Japan Avenue, and across the street from the big grade A ShopRite was a little neighborhood grocery store that their dad ran.
Yep. Then they bought Huber's Ice Cream.
Yeah.
And made the store. He's the driving force behind the business.
Rocky?
Rocky, yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, Rocky. Sam's a good guy.
Yeah.
Sam's a good guy, very community oriented, but Rocky's the guy that drove them to put this effort into the business and to become the size that they are today.
Well, Dave, thank you very much for the opportunity to interview you for the Oral History Project, and we'll be happy to burn a DVD of this interview.
Okay.
Is there
All right.
anything else you would like to add that we didn't talk about?
Well, I don't think people have the same experiences today that I had or we had. For instance, we lived on Colonial Road, and two things strike me there that will stick with me forever. One is that I was my parents' first child, and we lived on, I don't even remember the number, but Billy Heller lived in the same apartment house.
Mhm.
And I came home, and my mother went wild. I had this, what do you call it when babies have that?
Colic?
No, it's like scabs on top of your
Oh,
head, or cradle
okay.
cap, I guess it is. And she didn't know what to do. She was a young mother. Mrs. Heller came down and cured the whole thing. Billy's mother was, she's just his man's father also, but his mother was a sensational gal. His sisters, they drove my father crazy. My father's one of these guys that shut the light off, walk out of the room, shut the light off. His sister would run up and down the stairs putting the lights on. It wouldn't happen today. First of all, you wouldn't live in a 2-3 family house. Nobody would live.
And did you own that house, or?
No,
was
no,
it-
we rented it from Mrs. Heller. Yeah,
Mrs. Heller owned a lot of real estate.
yeah, she's a bright lady.
She owned all that area on Joan Road where
Yep.
Billy lives now.
Yeah,
She owned
Yeah.
all of the acreage
Yeah.
up there.
she was a nice woman. Boy, oh boy, boy, his father was he's a different kind of guy. His father was a different kind of guy. But they were great though. They were great. I think one of the things that struck me was, it sticks with me, is that people are sort of stratified today. They belong to rock women, or they belong, you're here, you're here. I don't think it was as true then, when we were young, that the Jewish community, everybody was in it.
Yeah, less options.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
As I recall, we didn't have the spread of religious institutions. We had, the shul was where the common people belonged,
Mm-hmm.
and the people who had money belonged to Temple Bethel.
Well, I guess so. I guess as a generality, yeah. We certainly didn't have money, but we belonged to Temple Bethel. The rabbi lived across the street from us.
Mhm.
But you're right. They definitely was.
Yeah, it is not a homogeneous community anymore.
No,
I mean, you
No.
get the Jewish Voice, I don't recognize more than 2 or 3 names in it anymore.
yeah, but part of that is us.
Yeah,
I mean, there are not a lot of us that we're here,
right.
but you look.
We're not active in the community.
We're not active in the community, and we're all, our demographic is this big, and it used to be this big.
Very true.
Okay.
Listen, it was.
Are there any other anecdotes about Goldberg's or the
No,
Pacific Street, anything else?
Pacific Street was fun. You know, Debbie, people used to say to me, how can you go down there at midnight? Things came, the railroad yards were down,
Jefferson
still are,
Street.
they still are.
Yeah.
And so stuff came by train. So you'd have to go and sign for the train, the car, and then they'd give you put your lock on the car. How can you go there? Midnight. My God. Never felt at all that I was in danger going down there at any time, day or night. I wouldn't do it today. I wouldn't, and I'm sure that it affects Fairway's business. That, people don't come there as frequently or as willingly at night. But other than that, I guess if you search up Debbie, I'm sure it told you lots of anecdotal things. So if I didn't know what she said, then I could. All right.
All right,
Thank you
David.
very much.
Appreciate it. It's nice that you do this, and it's, hopefully it does something to cement the community.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
our kids aren't here. See, that's
Yeah,
another of the
yeah.
big differences, is our kids, people married.
Local.
We married locally. It's not gonna happen now.
No.
And kids pick up and move. That's all, they move where the work is, so. All right, what?
Thank you.
Oh, man. Thank you. And